Welcome back to Lesson from the Middle. Today, we are jumping right in to the second part of our three-part series all around technology. So, as we think about, again, the holidays coming up, how we're using technology, this conversation today is really impactful because we're talking a lot about boundaries around technology. This quote from The Anxious Generation is something to consider, which is, we need to be careful about which kids have access to which products at which ages and on which devices. Unfettered access to everything, everywhere, at any age has been a disaster, even if there are a few benefits. And I think this is so important because each kid is different. You will hear people say, well, so-and-so has their phone and they seem great. Well, there's a big difference in how every kid is, right? I referenced in the last episode that I noticed with my middle that he would get really dysregulated with screens. So some of our kids do get more dysregulated than others with screens, but we also really need to be intentional and mindful about which age we're introducing these things to our kids, for how long that they have access and to which products. There's a big difference between watching a show and being on TikTok. Really thinking about this through the lens of that. A few things to consider about timeline for technology. So I said boundaries around 3 to 14. So really around 3, and I would say up until your kid is school aged, I personally, and based on the research, really don't see any need for any other device other than a TV that the family can watch. I don't think kids need iPads just yet. I get if you're like traveling on a plane and you want to put on like a Fire tablet or something, I would really stick to that. Again, the bigger the screen, the less the concern mentality. For kids in school, once they start in kindergarten, depending on your district, some districts do have one-to-one technology. And I would actually advocate that if your school is giving your kid an iPad in kindergarten, that you ask until at least, I would say, 4th or 5th grade, that iPad be kept at school and not come home. And the reason is that then starts this battle that maybe you're not ready yet. Monitoring tech is like a full-time job once you allow it into your home, right? Something I've noticed with a lot of families too is that at school, we have a lot of parameters in place that we can put in based on our Wi-Fi and other things. So kids can't always access things, but I will tell you, they still find many ways around any blocks that you put up. But something that a lot of parents don't always know is that the second that kids leave school, those blocks that we put up for kids with tech, they go away. So once kids are home on their own home Wi-Fi, that's gone, all those parameters. So it's super important that if you are having your kid bring it home and then they're using it, that you just make sure you're putting in your own parameters as parents so that they're not getting access to everything. And then I think it's completely up to you as a parent when you want them to get like a watch or I would say a flip phone, right? And that basically takes us until the age of 14. So the research is now saying 14 should really be when our kids get smartphones. 16 should be when our kids get social media. And the main thing that I see kids doing in middle school, honestly, is texting. And I think, yes, it's going to be hard to be a parent who is not giving in to social media. But man, I cannot stress the impact positively that you will be having on your child and their development by not giving them social media, especially the girls, which we will talk about in the next episode. Please try to follow that as long as you can, about 16 for social media. A lot of kids, if you have a watch or if you have a flip phone, they are able to text, they're able to call just to family or whoever you want to put that to. It's so much easier to control as a parent. And it gives them that freedom, but also allows you to, again, not allow such an influence on their mental health when they are in that prime developmental stage. So that 11 to 14 window is when we see kids really growing and changing and figuring out who they are. And adding social media to that is just like the perfect disaster that I see play out every day. And I remember Dr. Lisa Damour, she specializes in teenagers. And I remember her saying, like, she was interviewing high schoolers and about technology. And they said, don't worry about us. You need to be worrying about the 8th graders and the freshmen. And the reason is, again, they're in that like full developmental stage and they are getting so much more impacted by social media than even our juniors in high school or our college age kids who can have better boundaries and a better sense of self. So just thinking about that. If you want to start with TV, go for it. We use TV in our house, right? I would for sure stress, at least definitely in the primary years, that an iPad does not get brought home. And then when you're ready, if you feel like your kid's walking home from school or the bus, maybe you do let them have a watch where you control exactly what's on it, or that flip phone. You can even get, like, there's Bark phones and Gab phones, which are really great because they allow for a lot of flexibility without having social media. This next one might surprise you, but I'm going to share the top 3 locations that you should avoid screens in your home or just in general. Number 1, the bedroom. There should not ever be any screens in kids' bedrooms. And it's not just that it's there, it's that what we see play out all the time in middle school and even elementary school is that they are able to get on there and text. We see many, many kids who are being exposed to porn very early on because they're in their bedroom. It's secret. Nobody needs to know what they're doing, right? We don't know what they're seeing. We don't know what they're playing. We don't know the conversations that are happening. Even if they're not using it for that, there's been research that shows that even just having your phone in your room keeps you up a little bit more and doesn't let you get into that deep sleep. So bedroom, let's save that. Kids are sleep deprived. Let's keep that space just a good space for sleeping and relaxing, and take away any screens. And even if it's like you're doing homework should stay somewhere where the family can see. I would have so many middle schoolers come to me and say, yeah, I just tell my parents I'm going up to my room to do my homework, and I take my iPad and my phone up there, and then I just play on TikTok for hours. And then we'd get the email from the parents going, why on earth are you giving so much homework, right? So again, it just allows us to monitor them a little bit more when it's out for everybody. And it lets our kids know that they can't be texting until 2 a.m. or watching things that, we want to try to preserve that innocence, right? The most we can. The other time to avoid screens are meal times. This is a really great way to connect with our kids, is during a meal time. But also we want to foster that intuitive eating and letting kids really listen to their bodies. So making sure that our meal times are just a time to decompress and connect, and then they can go back to their show or whatever afterwards. The other one might surprise you, but car rides. And this can be shorter car rides. So if you're like, Ashley, I have a 3-hour trip coming up, I'm putting on a show. I get it. But car rides are an amazing time to connect with our kids because there's no direct eye contact. They're locked in there, so they can't go anywhere. And it's just a time where we can talk, or they can just be bored and look out the window. So they don't need this constant entertainment. And so really providing those breaks in their day where they can just decompress is so helpful. I think what we've seen is this shift of kids leave school. I would watch kids immediately get on their phones, then get in the car, get on their phones, and then they just go home and they get on their iPad and do work. So they are just on a screen for like 12 hours a day. And so how can we give them that break to recharge? And even if it's just on the way to school, let's give them a minute to just like get ready for the day. It doesn't, again, have to be a time where we're talking, but it's just giving them that minute to regroup, either from the day or preparing for the day. Similar to the routines, we need to put parameters in place of when we allow screens and texting and for how long. It provides that safety. It sets healthy boundaries for our kids. And we need to balance those real life activities with virtual ones. So I would have kids who would love drawing, and then they would get an iPad and all their drawing was done on a screen. That's, again, they're using one of those C's, but how can we make it so they're still drawing on paper and using a physical pen or pencil and understanding shading and doing those things? How can we get them outside to play, or even just building with their hands instead of just doing like Minecraft building, right? Like, we need to balance those real life activities and the virtual ones. And really thinking about setting up a do not disturb for those school hours. So I would see kids getting phone calls all day, texts all day. You would hear it buzzing, and it's so hard for them to focus. I think as parents, it's really helpful to say, all right, your phone's on do not disturb, or your watch is on do not disturb. Let them just focus on being a kid. And when friends come over, keep those same boundaries and communicate with the other parents ahead of time. I think this is really huge when your kids have cell phones. So if they don't have a cell phone, I understand that. But also, like, my daughter went over to a friend's house the other day and she told me that they watched an iPad in her friend's bedroom for like the hour that she was over there. And that just kind of bums me out, right? Like, that's not playing with a friend. And who knows, again, what they could be getting access to. So just trying to keep some of those same boundaries of letting them be social with their friends. I've heard so much from kids of, we had so much fun. Our phones didn't work. We didn't have Wi-Fi. So we actually had to talk to each other. Like, kids feel safer when they know that they're not going to be recorded. There aren't going to be pictures taken. We really love to put those parameters in place. And I know it can be hard. And then I've even heard from parents like, I can't believe how much I hear when they aren't on their phones. Like, if I'm driving in the car and they're on their phones, I hear everything. So allowing us to also get like that peek into their inside world and their social bubble of like what's going on, keeping those boundaries that help provide safety. And the last few considerations here for boundaries are, when introducing a watch, a phone, or texting, make sure that it's clear that you have access to their device. It is not their device. You are the one who bought it for them, is paying for it. Like, as a parent, you should be able to say, I'm going to routinely check your watch, your phone, whatever, and we will sit down and look at it together. It's not so much to see what they are doing, but also just to see what they are consuming, right? We want to see all those sides. Silencing notifications. Make sure that they aren't getting all the updates from Snapchat and TikTok or whatever if you're allowing them on social media, but silencing all of that. Monthly sit down to view their phone together. This can be a great way, again, to not to catch you're doing something, but to look at, hey, what are the games that you're playing? Like, why are you liking that right now? Just to get inside their world a little bit, because we do have kids who love technology. So let's see how they're using it and what they like about it. I've also had several students, and I think this is such a great boundary, but only to allow text to come through from contacts. So they have to have that contact in their phone in order to receive text from them. Take notice of shows or whatever it might be that impact behavior negatively. I'll see or hear from a lot of parents about how their kids seem maybe more defiant or they're concerned about attention. And then they take away YouTube and YouTube Shorts, and all of a sudden they're back to their normal selves. And I just said this, but really being mindful of YouTube and YouTube Kids. I can't stress this enough that there's a lot of harmful content on those apps, especially if you're watching, on your device. It just keeps feeding you the next episode. And there's parents who've gone in and looked, and they see that the third grader is being fed YouTube Shorts about why you should self-harm, about eating disorders, about depression. So we want to just really be mindful, because we don't need our kids being exposed to all of this, especially not through YouTube, where we're not even the ones being able to have the conversation with them about what this all means. So I just want you to reflect. That was a lot of information. And I want you to reflect on, did any of these boundaries surprise you? Why or why not? One of the big themes is to be intentional with tech use. So in what ways are you already doing this with your kids? And then which boundary do you want to implement or make sure to keep in mind as your kids get older? So I know many of you listening have toddlers, but there's so much that if you're already mindful about it now, it makes it so much easier, because you have a plan in place of like, I'm not going to allow social media until they're 16. So when your kid's 8 and they start asking you for it, no, this is harmful. I'm not doing it, right? So really just thinking about, how can you keep this in mind so we are being intentional and really thinking about our kids' mental health and their safety? All right, next week is the third and final episode of the series, where we're going to talk about the impact that gender can have on tech use. I hope so far that these 2 episodes have been really helpful, just to start to think about things you want to implement in your home to, again, continue to focus on mental health, preparing for those teen years.